Welcome to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio, sponsored by EarthX, the world's largest environmental experience, and also sponsored by Natural Awakenings magazine. Live your healthiest life on a healthier planet. Now, here's your host, Bernice Butler.
Welcome to today's show of Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio. We are now nearing the end of our second season, but we are still just more excited than ever to continue to help you explore and understand the unbreakable relationship between your health and the health of the planet. Here we look at the hottest topics related to our environment and its sustainability and how they affect your health and wellness. Here are issues like climate change, plastic pollution, extreme weather events, and others will meet up with everyday impacts like allergies and asthma, digestive issues and gut health, cancers, lung and heart issues, and more. So listen in today as we interview experts for today's show, the last in our series of air quality and transportation for the month of August. And today we're specifically going to be delving into the chronic disease toll of air pollution. Air pollution kills an estimated 7 million people worldwide every year. And the World Health Organization data shows that 9 out of 10 people breathe air that exceeds the World Health Guideline limits containing high levels of pollutants, with low and middle-income countries suffering the highest exposures. The World Health Organization is supporting countries to address a lot of this air pollution. From smog hanging over cities to smoke inside the home, air pollution poses a major threat to our health and our climate. The effects of ambient, which is outdoor air quality, and indoor or household air pollution cause about 7 million premature deaths every year, largely as a result of increased death from a number of common chronic diseases that most people don't associate with air pollution or any environmental issues, as well as the usual suspects of lung and respiratory issues. Some people are more susceptible than others to air pollutants. That can depend on the strength and the duration of exposure to pollutants, as well as exposure to multiple pollutants, as well as many, many other factors. The health burden of air pollution is not evenly shared. There are people more at risk of illness and death from air pollution than others. Several key factors affect an individual's level of risk. Among them, exposure, where somebody lives, where they go to school, where they work. All of those can make a big difference in how much pollution they breathe. In general, the higher the exposure, the greater the risk of harm. Another level of risk is determined by an individual's vulnerability. Children, older adults, and people living with chronic conditions, especially heart and lung disease, may be physically more susceptible to health impacts of air pollution than healthy adults, and we're going to talk about that a lot later. Also, the access to health care, whether or not a person has health coverage, a health care provider, and their access to culturally appropriate health information may influence their overall health status and how they may be impacted by environmental stressors like air pollution. And then there's psychosocial stress. There is increasing evidence that non-physical stressors such as poverty, racial, ethnic discrimination, fear of deportation, and others can amplify the harmful effects of air pollution. And these risk factors are not mutually exclusive, and they often interact in ways that lead to significant health inequalities among subgroups of the population, but that inevitably and increasingly affect us all. The World Health Organization says that around 91% of the world's population lives in places where air quality levels exceed their limits. And while the ambient outdoor air pollution affects developed and developing countries alike, again, some countries have a higher burden than others, with the greatest toll in the Western Pacific and the Southeast Asia regions. Policies and investments supporting cleaner transport, energy-efficient housing, energy-efficient power generation, industry, and better municipal waste management can all effectively reduce key sources of ambient air pollution. This is a lot, And here today to help us understand and unpack some of this are two very smart people who have a lot of experience in the area coming from different ways. First, we have Dr. Juanita Mora, MD. Juanita is an allergist and an immunologist in Chicago, and she has a strong interest in asthma care and breaking down barriers to asthma care in underserved communities. Dr. Mora is founder of the Chicago Allergy Center and a volunteer attending physician at the Illinois Masonic Medical Center in Chicago. Dr. Mora also serves as volunteer national spokesman for the American Lung Association, and she is a clinic partner with the American Lung Association, where her clinic has completed an 18-month quality improvement program in pediatric asthma. Dr. Mora's work with the American Lung Association deals closely with patient management and relations, as well as doing asthma education in the community and to healthcare workers through the American Lung Association workshops and health fair. Dr. Mora is a member of the Illinois Society of Asthma, Allergy, and Immunology, the College of Asthma, Allergy, and Immunology, and the American Academy of Asthma, Allergy, and Immunology. She received her medical degree from the University of Illinois College of Medicine in Chicago, and she completed an internal medicine and pediatrics residency, as well as an allergy and immunology fellowship at Rush Medical University, also in Chicago. Welcome, Juanita. We're so glad you could be with us, and did I get all of that right?
Yes, thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you. And our other guest is Vijay Limaye. Vijay is a climate and health scientist in the Natural Resource Defense Council's Science Center. As an epidemiologist, Vijay is broadly interested in addressing international environmental health challenges, quantifying, communicating, and reducing the risk associated with climate change. He has a focus on public health burdens of air pollution and extreme heat. At the Natural Resources Defense Council, Vijay leads economic valuation work to demonstrate the significant health cost of climate change, and he works to defend the science that underpins the National Clean Air Act. Prior to joining the National Resources Defense Council, Vijay worked as a U.S. Environmental Protection Agency scientist, and he's published several research studies on the health impacts of climate change-triggered air pollution and extreme heat in the U.S. and India. Vijay holds a bachelor's degree from the University of California, Berkeley, and a PhD in environmental epidemiology from the University of Wisconsin. And as I said, he is with the Natural Resources Defense Council, and he's based in New York City. And they are one of the premier organizations out there on the front lines doing the work to help inform all of us about environmental issues related to climate change. And guests from that organization, the NRDC, are frequent guests on this show. As well, Vijay has recently published an op-ed in the Washington Post titled, "The True Cost of Climate Change Needs to Include the Health Toll." And with that, he rose to the very top, or above the top, of my favorite people, because that is at the heart of the purpose of Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio. So again, thank you for that as well.
Thanks, Renee.
Again, thank both of you all for being with us. I want to start out by going back to the World Health Organization. Again, they did an analysis back in 2016 showing that 24% of global deaths and 28% of deaths among children under 5 are due to modifiable environmental factors. And as well, the NRDC says that the global toll of premature deaths attributed to the burning of coal, gasoline, and diesel is breathtakingly high, with new research doubling previous estimates. So, Vijay, I want you to start us out in telling our audience what are the components of air pollution and discuss both indoor and outdoor.
Sure. Thanks, Bernice, and it's really nice to be with you also, Juanita. So those World Health Organization statistics are pretty striking. And for me, the take home is that there's really no safe level of air pollution. All of the science indicates, the better that we get at monitoring both public health and levels of air pollution, both indoors and outdoors, it all basically points to the fact that there's no safe level of exposure, which is why, like you said, more than 90% of the global population is breathing in unhealthy levels of pollution. So we have work to do, certainly here in the US and around the world, to clean up the air pollution problem. I think a lot of people in the US figure that we sort of have things under control. But the truth is that millions of Americans right now are living in areas that exceed health-based controls, health-based standards. So when we talk about outdoor air pollution, we're concerned about a number of things. The number one top offender is called fine particulate matter. So shorthand is PM 2.5, which means 2.5 microns or smaller in diameter. That's about 30 times smaller than the width of a human hair. So we're talking about microscopic particles, a real toxic mix of both sort of solid materials and condensed liquid droplets. These are commonly the byproducts of burning fossil fuels. So when we burn coal or oil or natural gas, we basically unleash a whole slew of these microscopic particles that are especially harmful to human health because of their size.
And so when we get back, I want to talk about helping people recognize the particulate matter that they probably don't see and that they don't know that's all around them. We'll be right back on the other side of the break with Vijay Limaye with the Natural Resources Defense Council as he starts digging deep into his first component of air pollution, particulate matter. We want to give a shout out now to our sponsors. That is Natural Awakenings, Dallas-Fort Worth Magazine, the Green, Healthy, and Sustainable Living Authority for the DFW Metroplex and North Texas communities. Print issues of Natural Awakenings can be found in all Whole Foods grocers, Natural Grocers, Central Market, Sunflower Shops, and many, many other locations, as well as available free for download online at nadallas.com. Check them out. Our other sponsor is North Haven Gardens, serving the Metroplex since 1951, the most respected horticultural establishment in North Texas, offering gardening and plant education, concierge services, DIY classes, gifts, and more. Check them out at nhg.com. And Lynn Dental Care, practicing dentistry for over 38 years with a holistic approach, none mercury, looking at the whole body. Specializing in periodontics, Dr. Lynn is board certified by the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. Check them out at lindentalcare.com. And our other sponsors, Profound Foods. It is the marketplace for real local food in North Texas. They deliver local organic food to your door each week in 33 North Texas zip codes. With over 50 local farmer producers, Profound Foods is building a more connected, resilient food system in North Texas. Check them out at profoundfoods.com. Thank you, sponsors. Welcome back to today's episode of Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio as we delve into the chronic disease toll of air pollution. And before the break, Dr. Vijay Limaye with the Natural Resources Defense Council was telling us about one component of air pollution, and that is particulate matter. And he was just telling us how particulate matter is generally the result of combustion. Is that right? Combustion in general, or is it just fossil fuel combustion?
Generally, fossil fuels are the primary contributor here. And we're talking about, that's the, microscopic pollution that's penetrating deep into our bodies. It can bypass our natural defense mechanisms like coughing or sneezing or swallowing, actually enter deep into the lung and enter the bloodstream. And there they travel to nearly every organ system, which is why the science indicates that exposure to these fine particles worsens asthma, heart disease, lung cancer, even linked lately to dementia and the onset of Alzheimer's disease. So it's an extraordinarily damaging pollutant, and it's directly linked to fossil fuel combustion. Another air pollutant that we're really concerned about is ozone smog, which is probably familiar to a lot of your listeners because it's a problem, especially in the summer. Ozone isn't emitted directly from a tailpipe or a smokestack. It rather forms in the air, and it's more likely to form when it's warmer outside. So just like fine particulate matter, it's a byproduct of fossil fuel combustion, but it's really building blocks that are combining in the air, and they combine more quickly when it's hotter outside, which is why we have ozone alert days in the middle of the summer. We've seen huge exceedances in ozone pollution just this summer because of record high temperatures in different parts of the country. So just like fine particulate matter, ozone is a lung irritant and is linked to exacerbation of asthma, and is, just generally another stressor on our bodies. So these are widespread air pollution problems that Dr. Mora can describe more in terms of what she sees patients showing up with. But the take home for me is that, outdoor air pollution is a big problem right now, and climate change threatens to make it even worse. At the same time, I'll just briefly touch on indoor air pollution. More and more, over the last year and a half, many of us have spent a tremendous amount of time inside. And inside homes and offices, we are also exposed to different types of air pollutants. They might be things like asbestos, carbon monoxide, byproducts from using a gas cook stove like I have in my apartment. We're talking about a whole range of pollutants, some of them that are regulated outside by the Clean Air Act, but aren't regulated in terms of levels indoors. So we need to pay attention, especially in the era of COVID, to ventilation rates and assuring clean air environments, both in indoor environments, but also as we engage in activities outside. So we don't have a regulatory framework to really address indoor air pollution in a comprehensive way like we do for outdoor air pollution, but it's becoming more of a focus in the health science literature because we're understanding more and more, given how much people spend time indoors, how much they're being exposed to some of these really toxic compounds over the life course.
And in a minute, we'll talk with Dr. Mora, because I imagine that's her wheelhouse a lot.
Yeah.
Even though she deals with the other two, people are in their homes quite a bit too. And let me ask you this. You mentioned your cook stove. So what about a fireplace? Because I've been told anything that combusts, I have to think is producing something out there. It may or may not be bad or produce particulate matter, but anything that combusts.
Yeah, absolutely. The air that we breathe is mostly composed of nitrogen, actually, right? And so when we superheat the air by burning things, we basically form what's called nitrogen oxides, including nitrogen dioxide, NO2, which is a known lung irritant. It's one of the 6 pollutants that EPA regulates under the Clean Air Act. So anytime we are burning coal, oil, or natural gas in our homes or in power plants, in our wood, exactly, solid biomass, any of those things are polluting. They're contributing to toxic byproducts that ultimately, to some degree, end up inside us, right? And it's there that they can inflict a whole lot of damage. So you might not see it all, but these microscopic particles are unfortunately inflicting damage, to the tune of probably 100,000 deaths or so in the United States every year linked to fine particle exposure.
Indeed. I want to move on to Juanita, too. Talk to us about what are some of the first signs and then later signs that people may get so that they can know that they may have been affected by the quality of the air around them.
Sure, absolutely. As a physician, I see this a lot, especially the first sign. I completely agree with everything Dr. Vijay just said. And one of the things is, first of all, knowing just what your county is doing. What is the impact of the air cleanliness in your county? And people can go to lung.org/SOTA, which is State of the Air, and then you can plug in your zip code, and then people can look up what is their actual quality of their county when it comes to the air that they're breathing. Because first signs that I see, especially now during COVID-19 times, where we do not want respiratory lungs being compromised by all the air pollutants, is starting of a cough. It starts as a nasal congestion, dropping in. Sometimes they show up initially with sinus infection. As the strippage goes down to their lungs as well, too, the particulate matter infiltrates. Then over chronic time, we start seeing, for example, kids with first wheezing episodes, kids who've never wheezed before. Now they've been playing outside, et cetera, in their yard. They're breathing this air, and suddenly they're having wheezing episodes or coughing episodes, et cetera. So one thing I actually am a big proponent of is knowing what the state of the air is in your specific county and what are green days, what are yellow days, what are orange days as well, and what are red days. And so all these are great symptoms to actually know more about for you.
I'm glad you brought those day colors up, right? Because I never ever heard anybody talk about the green days. But here in North Texas, we know about the red and orange days because today is probably one of them, and ozone alert days. But I really do wish there were more information put out there about the green days, too, so people would just have a good sense of tuning into or being aware of the quality of the air, and I think they have to recognize the green days too. I wanted to put out there too, Vijay was talking about the various components, and you have been too. What is mold classified as? Is that an air pollutant or just maybe a chemical toxin or what? How is it classified?
So it's one of those air allergens. So as an allergist, I do see a lot of outdoor and indoor. So because of climate change, I want to educate your viewers. We are seeing actually longer allergic seasons. And the reason for it, we are just coming out of a pandemic year. There were not a lot of cars out there. So this pollen is really growing nicely unopposed from all the actual pollution that it normally has. The other thing is because of climate change, we are having, like, for example, shorter winters, which means longer springs, longer summers, longer actual as well to fall. And ragweed has been one of those allergens that has been really affecting people's health. And our ragweed seasons keep getting longer and longer. It usually starts around Labor Day. Well, guess what? Ragweed is out already in the United States, all throughout the country. And it's already starting to cause wheezing, the sinus infections, ear infections, everything else too. And as an allergist, looking at climate change and these aero allergens, we know that by the year 2050, we expect actual ragweed levels to almost be 12 times as high as they are today. So I'm not going out of business anytime soon.
Yeah.
But it's crazy when you think about it because that's why people are coming into the office and they're like, Dr. Mora, I've never had allergy seasons, but this year, this is the reason why.
I want to dig just for a minute. So many people are sensitive to the ragweed. Where does that come from? Why is it so pervasive and why are so many people sensitive to it?
Ragweed is your fall allergen. Ragweed and weeds definitely is the brown plant I tell people that you see in yards, you see in parks all throughout, that looks really tall, so it likes to grow tall and loves to spread in the air. And those dips in temperatures that we see in the fall helps it to really spread all throughout. So when kids or adults go Halloween, trick-or-treating, or they're going to their, to the pumpkin patch, etc., this is what they're inhaling nicely all throughout. And it really is the way allergies work. They hit the nose, cause you stuffy nose, mucus can't run this way, starts running up the sinuses, up the eyes, to the ears, postnasal dripping down to the lungs. So it predisposes with all this mucus congestion to sinus infections, ear infections, bronchitis, or new onset asthma, allergic asthma that often happens in people. And ragweed specifically is the pollen that loves to wheeze. It's small in size and loves to go into the small airways and cause wheezing episodes, allergic asthma type variant symptoms in patients, in both kids and adults.
And so, Vijay, can we do something to kill off ragweed?
If only. Yeah, Dr. Moore is totally right.
Indeed. And then we were talking really briefly about mold, and I know that it has something to do with rain, weather, etc., that's causing it to be more of a pervasive problem.
Exactly. So it's a perennial allergen. So one of the things that we know, there's outdoor mold and indoor mold. And so outdoor mold, we find, and I always tell people in spring as the snow melts, and all the beautiful leaves that have been laying under the snow the whole winter, that's your moldy source that we're exposed to. And obviously in the fall, as the leaves fall, they get wet. You go walk your dog through it. Kids love to jump into it. Adults walk through it. It's all mold exposure, especially with all the rainy weather, too. We've had a lot of humidity, a lot of heat days all throughout the country. And then we have all these rainy days. Mold counts have also been very high as well, too. And so it's kind of like that island weather, I tell people, where mold is going to be high and, of course, cause health issues as well.
It's time to go to break, but this is such interesting and relevant conversation. So we're going to go to the break, and we will be right back with Dr. Juanita Mora and Dr. Vijay Limaye as they just make us much smarter and hopefully more sensitized about the disease toll of our air quality. Thank you all. Welcome back to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio. We are back with Dr. Juanita Mora with the Allergy Center of Chicago and Dr. Vijay Limaye with the Natural Resources Defense Council. And we are talking about the chronic disease toll of air quality and air pollution. Right before the break, Juanita was mesmerizing us with these common allergens, mold and ragweed. But I want to move on now to Vijay to talk a little bit more and dig deeper for our audience. What is the estimate of the people in the world and the U.S. who are actually dying prematurely from air quality degradation or air pollution?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you mentioned at the top of your segment, it's more than 7 million deaths around the world every year are caused by indoor and outdoor air pollution. That's huge, right? We don't appreciate that air pollution rivals, high blood pressure, smoking, diet risks, alcohol use. It's definitely in the top 5 risk factors for early death, and that's because it's a widespread menace to public health. It's, think about how many times you're breathing in throughout the day, and if you are breathing in polluted air, you are potentially delivering toxic compounds to nearly every organ system in the body. So we know, like you said, that the air pollution problem is not equally distributed around the world. I do a lot of work in India, which often makes headlines in the fall and early winter due to gigantic spikes in air pollution that many of its cities unfortunately experience. But like I said earlier, air pollution remains a big problem here in the U.S. as well. The Clean Air Act has been our main tool to help deliver cleaner air to people around this country. It's estimated that when you add up all the health benefits in economic terms from that single law, they outweigh the implementation costs by a factor of more than 30 to 1. So it's clear that air pollution is a widespread problem, but one that we know more and more about. All of the epidemiology evidence that I've spent the last decade looking at indicates that every step we can take to clean up our air will deliver tangible near-term benefits to people right now. And that's because we know right now so many millions of Americans are suffering from health problems that are caused or worsened by air pollution. So we're talking about things like heart disease. We're talking about things like asthma. More than 25 million Americans are living with asthma right now. COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, afflicts more than 16 million people in this country. Even lung cancer is tied to air pollution exposure. More than 4,000 lung cancer deaths are tied to fine particle exposure right now. And all of that is without the context of COVID, right? We know that people with pre-existing heart and lung conditions are at heightened risk of severe complications and even death from the coronavirus because it attacks people who have these pre-existing conditions even harder. It's harder for them to deliver a robust immune response. Dr. Mora is the expert here, so I won't get outside of my lane too much, but just to say that, when we talk about being prepared for COVID infections, we need to also consider pre-existing health conditions and the disproportionate burden that air pollution, especially from industrial plants, power plants, highways, is already afflicting communities of color and low-income communities. Those places are disproportionately burdened by both COVID and air pollution. So this is really an environmental justice issue at the core and why we need to act aggressively right now to wean ourselves from fossil fuels, because that's the number one way to cut deadly air pollution. I think the wildfire problem also tells that story very clearly. Yeah. We have huge unprecedented fires burning in Western states. That air pollution is not staying in one place. It is traveling hundreds of miles downwind, afflicting air quality in the Midwest and out east, causing some of the worst air quality days in New York City that have been seen in nearly a decade. So certainly when we think about the fire problem and see it on the news, it's not just California or Oregon or Washington's problem, it's everybody's problem because the smoke doesn't stay in one place. The science indicates that the particles in that smoke are even deadlier than the particles coming from burning coal. And that's because we're seeing the incineration burning of things that weren't meant to burn, homes, car batteries.
All the stuff caught up in it,
Yeah, okay. So we saw gigantic spikes in lead pollution, for example, in the Camp Fire in California a couple of years ago. That is really scary because we don't really understand the health risks associated with really, gigantic acute exposures to these toxic compounds that we've not really seen in years past.
Indeed. Vijay, in your op-ed you recently wrote for the Washington Post, you say, we need to fix how we account for death and disease toll of climate change. How do we do that? Because I truly agree.
Yeah, when we think about the climate problem, we hear a lot in the news about damage to property or crops or bridges and roads, but we hear much less about ruined lives, right? Death, illness, injury triggered by heat waves, wildfires, air pollution episodes, stronger coastal storms, floods, mega droughts. All of that has a huge toll on public health, and we need to better account for those health problems, both in health terms as well as financial terms. We know that more than 1 in 3 Americans right now can't afford necessary medical care. Medical financial hardship is endemic in this country. Millions of people are foregoing care for medical problems, and delaying or foregoing that care makes them, unfortunately, even more vulnerable to climate risks. So we're trying to attach some dollar figures to the present day burden of climate sensitive events. We've identified billions of dollars in health damages tied to those deaths, illnesses, and injuries, and the need for treatment in hospitals and emergency rooms across this country. So as CDC works its way through COVID, we also needed to step up in terms of comprehensive real-time data surveillance tied to climate hazards, because it's only in understanding the true toll of these problems across the country that we can better shape adaptation solutions that will help to protect communities and keep people out of harm's way.
And I want to talk to Juanita for a minute. We'll talk more about the time or the timing and the exposure levels and those effects on health and the environment. So I know it means different things to different people in terms of what kinds of pollutants they're exposed to and for how long they're exposed to it. Can you talk to us about that?
Absolutely. So when we looked at data, and American Lung Association has delved really into it, we know that, for example, the communities of color are going to be 3 times more likely to live in a county that has big amounts of at least failing grades of 2 or more of these pollutants. And when we look at, for example, Latino or African American communities as well too as a whole, we know that poverty levels are going to be actually higher in these populations. And we're going to see as well too that the other thing is they're going to be more likely to live near a plant that contaminates their breathing of air. So what does this mean as a whole is that these are the kids that are riding the school bus that are going to be more apt to be inhaling this pollutant. They also live closer as well too to these coal plants, so they're going to have exposure in the home place as well too. So all these combinations together, we know that it's going to affect these kids, these adults, these older adults on a long-term basis and create more health complications. And just like Dr. Vijay said, it's really put everything, when we put it into perspective, and the way I like to explain it to patients, it's really, when we talk about deaths, just like Dr. Vijay said, just to put it in perspective, it's like a 747 plane crash every day. That's how many deaths a day we have from particulate matter in the United States.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, and so I learned that from a paper, and I was like, I never forgot that actual imagery. And it really puts it into perspective, because we're talking about, COVID-19 has already created and unveiled a lot of health disparities to begin with. And now you have these same hard-hit communities that are also being hard-hit with all the contaminants, all the pollutants as well, too. So really, this is where, as a country, we have to appeal to our legislators and to the EPA to really help clean up our air.
We do. And again, one of the biggest problems I see, too, is that people are not getting that. They don't attribute that 747 full of bodies with the death count to air pollution. They attribute it to other things, and therefore they're not sensitized to the depth of the problem. And we just have a few minutes to go before we need to go to break, but we will be back to continue this on the other side of the break. But Juanita, what are you seeing most exposure to in your healthcare practice?
So at this time, obviously particulate matter, especially there was big controversy here in Chicago because a power plant was demolished in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic near a neighborhood that's Mexican-American, very impoverished. And they asked, environmental justice, they asked American Lung Association to chime in, and how was this allowed to be done and put people at higher risk for complications.
And we'll talk more about this on the other side of the break, because they probably thought they were doing a good thing by demolishing the plant, and it turned out to be bad. We'll talk on the other side. We're going to go to break now, and we'll be back with Dr. Juanita Mora and Dr. Vijay Limaye. We want to give a shout-out now to our sponsors. That is Natural Awakenings, Dallas-Fort Worth Magazine, the Green, Healthy, and Sustainable Living Authority for the DFW Metroplex and North Texas communities. Print issues of Natural Awakenings can be found in all Whole Foods grocers, Natural Grocers, Central Market, Sunflower Shops, and many, many other locations, as well as available free for download online at nadallas.com. Check them out. Our other sponsor is North Haven Gardens, serving the Metroplex since 1951, the most respected horticultural establishment in North Texas, offering gardening and plant education, concierge services, DIY classes, gifts, and more. Check them out at nhg.com. And Lynn Dental Care, practicing dentistry for over 38 years with a holistic approach, none mercury, looking at the whole body. Specializing in periodontics, Dr. Lynn is board certified by the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. Check them out at lindentalcare.com. And our other sponsors, Profound Foods. It is the marketplace for real local food in North Texas. They deliver local organic food to your door each week in 33 North Texas zip codes. With over 50 local farmer producers, Profound Foods is building a more connected, resilient food system in North Texas. Check them out at profoundfoods.com. Thank you, sponsors. Welcome back to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio, to today's show on the chronic disease toll of air pollution. And we are back with Dr. Vijay Limaye with the Natural Resources Defense Council and Dr. Juanita Mora with the Allergy Center of Chicago and the American Lung Association. Again, thank you all. You really are making us smarter about all of this today. Before the break, Juanita, you were telling us about a lot of what you're seeing in your practice right now. And I want to ask you, though, too, what really going back to what I think is perhaps maybe the often forgotten vulnerable population, and that's our children. What is the most common childhood illness you're seeing that's affected by air pollution?
Asthma exacerbations. Yeah, so I see a lot of the underserved city of Chicago population. So I see a lot of asthma exacerbations, and I look at the bad air quality days, and I ask them what county they live in, and I kind of see what triggers they're having. It wasn't the simple cold that they had or that dropped to their chest and caused the asthma exacerbations. A lot of the stories is like he was just playing outside with his brother and suddenly he started having an asthma exacerbation. Or he went outside and walked with grandpa or grandma and they were both kind of started coughing and feeling short of breath. Those are the types of stories I hear a lot.
I can imagine. What is the effect of the common pollutants, particulate matter, ozone? How do those affect some of the other vital organs of the body? I know that lung and respiratory are the main organs attacked, and that's what most people know about and assume. But tell us about some other areas that are affected.
Sure. And what we know about particulate matter, just like Vijay said, it's really 1/30 the strand of a hair goes into the nose, going down the throat, and it starts depositing into all these organs. So one is like you think the heart. So over time, it hardens the arteries, causes heart disease. The other place, the lungs. So initially might show up as an asthma exacerbation. Over long-term, lung cancer, all these deposits as well, too. It can also travel, again, to the brain, so cause cognitive impairment, early Alzheimer's disease, even stroke, put you at high risk, because remember, it's traveling all throughout your bloodstream and into every other organ. Claudication of the actual legs, having trouble with circulation. And then when we look at other disease states that are affected, pregnant women are going to be higher risk to miscarry because of this pollutant as well, too. Also, of early childbirth and having defects as well, too. So all of this actually contributes to it and eventually to early death as well.
I want to talk a little bit about COVID, or rather coronavirus, new viruses out there. And maybe both of you all can weigh in on this too. Are there any thoughts or conversation or even research out there that talks about the intersection of future coronaviruses and air quality, perhaps, or climate change?
So I honestly think, more research is going to be on the way. But one of the things that we know is that long-standing air pollution causes and puts people at higher risk for lung complications. And then you have virus like COVID-19 coming in that does exactly that as well, too. Guess what? That combination is going to be a lethal combination. So therefore, I totally agree. We need to clean up our air before other viruses like the coronavirus come in and cause more health implications in our population.
Indeed. What are you seeing, or what have you heard, Vijay?
It's clear that, the emergence of new infectious disease is tied to the increasing intersection of human society with wild places, right? And we know that coronaviruses are circulating in wild bat populations, et cetera. And when we have more kind of fragmented ecosystems and more interface between humans and wildlife, we're more likely to see these spillover events. So certainly we need to think about the, habitat destruction that's happening in tandem with climate change and think about how it affects all of us. I don't think 2 years ago, anyone could have imagined what we've been facing as the result of this sequence of events. So I think also the last, stretch of time has shown us just how important prevention is, right? How much we need to invest in public health preparedness in order to set people up for healthier, thriving futures.
Indeed. And we talked all the show and a lot about air pollution effects on human health. I have to think it's affecting the health of our plants and our pets as well. Juanita, does air quality have any effect on weight gain and mental health?
Air quality and mental health I have seen, and just because of the fact that of the cognitive impairment that can come, which bounce as well to an increased risk of depression. And for example, COVID-19 itself has brought on a lot of mental health, so the combination has been really bad. Obesity itself is a risk factor for both COVID-19 and for complications from climate change as well, too, as we know. And now we're kind of facing a new pandemic coming out of this pandemic, which is that kids actually have gained 30 to 40 pounds within the last year. And there's new onset diabetes in the pediatric population.
Oh, my, I had heard that one.
Yeah, huge risk factor. So this is one of the things to think about, because you not only have climate change affecting them, you have COVID-19, you have this inactivity because they sat down the whole year. And then they ate sugar, because nothing was balanced. Parents were working.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I knew about the adult 15 to 20 pound COVID pound, but I've not heard a lot of conversation about kids. So I want to talk now about solutions. And I want to start with you, Juanita. How can people best protect their health?
One is knowing what your county is doing, what is your air quality. So that's one. And you can go to lung.org/SOTA, State of the Air, to find out and plug in your zip code. Second thing is really cleaning up our air. What can we do as a society? One is electric vehicles, conversion to zero-emission electric vehicle. Because if we can clean up with electric vehicles a lot of the air that we are actually breathing, then we're going to be saving, actually, if we do this conversion by the year 2025, we will be saving over 93,000 people. We will be saving $6 billion in health costs, and we will also be saving actually over 170,000 people from being hospitalized. due to health complications from climate change.
That's significant because it's only 4 years from now. So I think people can wrap their heads around it. That needs to be said and said and said again. In 4 years, if we can convert more to electric vehicles, then here's what can happen. Again, that's a bite-sized chunk that people can actually understand. Now, what about health-wise? Is there nutrition or anything else that people can do on a personal level to help to mitigate the effects of this assault that we have to live in?
Keeping healthy. So obviously moving, activity, exercise is going to be so important in both pediatric and adult populations. We've seen what COVID-19 has done with inactivity, and a good diet. A good balanced diet is going to be super, super important to boost your energy and health levels.
And I've heard, too, that sweating or some kind of way, steaming or something where you, if you have the ability or can draw some of that out, that may be helpful as well?
Absolutely, because it gets rid of the toxins. So move.
Exactly. Thank you. And Vijay, last word for you. We've got just a few minutes to go. What are some of the things you all are seeing and doing over at the Natural Resource Defense Council to address some of your findings and a lot of this research that you're doing?
Yeah, I think we're trying to drive home what you just highlighted with Dr. Mora, that, when we talk about addressing the climate crisis, we're not just talking about long-term improvements, right? We're not going to have to wait decades to reap the benefits of transitioning rapidly away from fossil fuels and towards cleaner, healthier, renewable energy sources like wind and solar. We can clean up air quality and deliver huge benefits to health, to savings in health costs from, not having to go to the hospital or the emergency room in the first place, by driving this clean energy transition as fast as we possibly can. So, to me, it's really about making the case that these benefits are here now. They're on the table for us to grab, but we really need the political will to do so. And there's just so much that can be done also in terms of energy efficiency, energy conservation, being smart about our energy choices, because they have real, concrete, solid effects downstream on air quality and public health. So to me, this is a challenge in front of us. We haven't solved it by any means. We've come a long way in terms of the Clean Air Act, but climate change threatens to undo all of the hard work we've been doing over the past half century on air pollution control. So the time is now really to address this problem.
Indeed, and I think communications. And both of you all are with organizations as well as individually where you do a lot of that. And of course, with Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio, that's, as a social enterprise, that's what we're about too, is communicating, because we really feel that once people realize, understand, and internalize the issues and impacts, then they will be encouraged to change behavior and make a difference. So I really appreciate it. I thank you all so much for being with us. We have been with Dr. Vijay Limaye with the Natural Resource Defense Council and Dr. Juanita Mora with the Allergy Center Chicago and the American Lung Association. And they indeed have made us smarter, giving us some very important information, but very practical information. And we feel like that's what's going to make the difference. Thank you all so much for being with us. And we look forward to having both of you all back with us on another show next season. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you both.
And thank you, listeners, for listening in today to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio. The conversation starts here, but our goal is for it to continue in your home, in your social circles, your workplace, at the water cooler, and in the grocery checkout line, so that we can all work together to realize that healthy living is simply not possible without a healthy planet. Our culture is the result of 1 trillion tiny acts taken by billions of people every day, like yourselves. And each of those tiny acts can seem insignificant, but all of them add up, one way or the other, to the change that we each live through. This is your host, Bernice Butler. Thank you so much. And join us again next week as we talk about our September topics of environmental justice and social equity of climate change. Thank you.